Good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. People are still signing up. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is our second community conversation about designated camping sites. And my name is Sam Adams, and I'm on Mayor Wheeler's Strategic Innovations Group.
And I'm Sky Brocker-Knapp, and I'm a Senior Policy Advisor on the Strategic Innovations Group.
So we're going to, we appreciated the additional questions and conversation at our first meeting, and that video is posted online. And between our last meeting and this meeting, we've refined and added to this draft of intended to memorialize this community conversation. And so some of you are new, some of you are returning. So for those that are returning, you're going to hear at the beginning we're going to go through some of the same questions, and you might hear some updates and refinements in how we're answering them based on the kinds of questions that you asked. So we tried to answer as many of the questions in the first series of slides, but then after that we have additional questions that were asked that they're related, that don't necessarily neatly fit into the Q&A at the beginning. So we're going to get going, and if we could get the next slide, please.
All right, so we're just gonna do an overview of the 5 resolutions that Mayor Wheeler proposed and that council approved. So you've probably seen some of this in the news, but we just want to give everyone just an overview of all of these pieces to this whole proposal. So I'm just gonna start with the first one, 927, is to establish key actions to increase affordable housing construction. So among other things, that is to reduce the 5-year average waiting lists that you've probably seen in the news for affordable housing. And to catalyze the construction of 20,000 units of affordable housing by 2033. So those different parts of that plan, and those can be read in the resolutions that are going to be linked in this PowerPoint, and they're also on our website. So the second resolution is 928. Its aim is to assess options to increase coordination and enhance unhoused access to paid non-standard work. So it's a workforce development program, and we're looking to work with our different partners, including Work Systems Inc. That has some federal resources to assess and explore a system to better structure gig and itinerant work for those who don't fit neatly into kind of our current work structure and system, to give opportunities to those folks who are living unsheltered currently. And our third resolution is 929, and that's the highlighted portion here, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot today. So that's connecting mental health and substance abuse recovery services to unhoused individuals, folks living unsheltered on the streets of Portland. So part of that is changing the city's outdoor camping protocols to better connect homeless individuals with available sanitation, mental health, and substance abuse recovery services, as well as physical health services, and to ban self-sited encampments with designated alternative locations. So those designated camping areas are mostly what we're talking about today. The fourth resolution is 930. So setting city budget priorities to implement affordable housing, connect homeless individuals with sanitary, mental health, and substance abuse recovery services, and request assistance from county, metro, state, and federal partners. So that's kind of the funding angle and really that partnership piece that's so important and critical to these other resolutions. So it commits the city to a multi-jurisdictional conversation and advocacy to meet Oregon's housing and homelessness crisis. So a lot of what we're talking about requires a lot of resources, a lot of partners, a lot of expertise. And so that resolution really lays out those different needs. The fifth resolution is 931. So creating a diversion program for individuals experiencing homelessness. The intent is to request assistance from stakeholders and to create a services diversion program by offering people cited for low-level offenses and who have other legal issues. So expunging those low-level offenses and really getting people connected to the services who might have felt like they had barriers to entry for a lot of those service providers and shelter spaces. So those are just a quick overview of all of our 5 resolutions, but as we said, there's definitely opportunities to dig more deeply into the details on our website with all the resolutions.
Next slide, please. All right, so why are designated camping sites being proposed? The goal here, the mayor's goal, and Commissioner Ryan's goal, along with those that supported it on the city council, is to move those experiencing outdoor houselessness closer to services. Currently, there are 800 self-sided, unsanctioned encampments across the 146 square miles of Portland. An estimated 94% of outdoor houselessness report that they have never been offered shelter services. And part of that scatter is the reason, and it is very difficult to make contact with the sort of ever-moving scatter of 800 self-sided unsanctioned encampments. For those on the street that want affordable housing, the waiting time can take up to 5 to 10 years based on a snapshot analysis by Home Forward. Another reason why we need, this is a public health emergency and we need folks closer, get folks that are experiencing outdoor houselessness closer to services, is the fact that the significant increases in use and overdose rates of potent street drugs, especially fentanyl and meth, and they've already had dire consequences on Portlanders. 63% of houseless Portlanders report that they suffer from some sort of mental health issues, and drug overdoses in Multnomah County across housed and unhoused has increased 94% between 2019 and 2021. That's a 588% increase in fentanyl overdoses. Next slide.
And then why is this being proposed? Kind of our second slide on that is indoor shelter is not the shelter preference for many. So this is based on more than 600 contacts by city outreach workers with different homeless individuals over the last few months. And about 80% of outdoor homeless folks did not accept offers for indoor shelter, congregate shelter space, kind of the traditional shelter model. And of those who turned down those indoor shelter offers, we had these city outreach workers ask a follow-up question of, would you accept an outdoor designated camping space? And 7 out of 10 of those individuals said they would accept that offer with basic services, sanitation, food, and then service connection too would be ideal. So that's kind of what this is based off of as well.
Next slide, please. So elements, what is being proposed? So the elements of the designated camping sites include in total 6 professionally managed camping sites, these designated camping sites. Initially, each site will have 100 tents for up to 150 people per site. City Council must approve an additional, if we seek to add an additional 100 people at that site, that same site, one of the 6 sites, then the City Council has to approve that. So we have to go back to the City Council, public hearing, you and others will have a chance to weigh in. The designated camping sites are intended to provide better access to what services are available related to physical, mental, and behavioral health, substance abuse addiction services. Again, there's no possible way we could make the kind of connections for these services in existing 800 camps, which I think we determine as 3 tents makes a camp, at least 3 tents. Designated camping sites improve navigation to housing and shelter resources in addition to social service resources. Residents will be provided 2 meals a day and a hefty snack. There's 1 controlled entrance and exit, although people can come and go that are residents at camp anytime they want. And there's 24-hour staffing. We'll get into some more details on that. 24-hour staffing on site, and there is 1,000-foot perimeter security outside and around each of these designated camping sites.
Next slide, please. So these are some ideal amenities of designated camping sites that we've done some research on, talked to different individuals about at different groups and service providers. So campsite services of what is being proposed, these are elements that we want to see on the site. So basic infrastructure, obviously, but also electricity and clean water. Appropriate weatherproofing is definitely essential depending on location. So Portland is going to look differently than Southern California or Texas or different warmer climates. Restrooms and showers, obviously, for everyone. Adequate lighting, laundry access as well is huge, something that folks really ask for all the time. Community space for folks to congregate or eat meals or just have some time together and build that community. A pet area, so like a dog run area and places for pets to be safe and be penned kind of in. Storage for belongings, additional storage that would need to exist outside of anyone's individual tent, transportation to different services, electricity, phone charging is a huge piece at a lot of designated camping sites, Wi-Fi kind of along the same vein, and then perimeter fencing where appropriate. That's going to be pretty site specific. Regular trash collection and hazardous waste removal obviously are givens, and then potential mail service as well for residents on site.
And that last one, the potential mail service, was a question and suggestion from our last meeting. So these are our goals for the providing these amenities at the designated camping sites. Next slide, please. So the service provider model, a little more detail of what we're looking for in a service provider, a group of folks that'll be managing the camp. Again, service provider will manage 24/7 every day of the year. The idea is for a 15-to-1 staff-client ratio. We're using the Built for Zero client-centered public health approach to guide clients through the continuum of service. So we will be asking people for their name and birth date to be able to provide the kinds of assistance through the various services available around town. Weapons are not allowed in the designated site. Weapons must be checked at the entrance, and this is a zero tolerance policy. Drugs and alcohol at the site cannot be consumed in public spaces or common areas. There'll be no cooking or fires allowed. Individuals will find their way to the camp based on a referral system. No walk-ins will be allowed. We will develop sustainable and untapped workforce development pipeline in terms of the kinds, working with the provider we hire, people that have a passion for this work, the right sort of outlook on this work, and we'll go into the kind of training that they'll receive as well. A little more detail on that later slide. Next slide.
And then for siting specifically, so these are our ideal location attributes. Obviously, these are just guidelines for what we're looking for, but as much as possible, distance from residential areas, schools, and business districts. Near a transit connection is big. A lot of folks will be residents, won't have vehicles, obviously, so having access to services and maybe work along a transit line is essential. Sites be balanced geographically across the city. 2 to 4 acres approximately in space, just to have enough space for each individual, and then community spaces as well as kitchen areas, and then restrooms and showers as well. And then being mindful of adding designated camping sites to the total mix of neighboring social services. So really getting a sense of what already is in existence, and then spacing out different designated camping sites according to those social services.
Currently, we're in active conversation with 7 sites around the city. Not all of them will work out, and we keep looking for other sites. If you have any ideas for sites, we're looking for 2 to 4 acres. Again, these are some of the location ideal attributes that we're looking for, and welcome your suggestions. Next slide. Why don't you do this?
Okay. So good neighbor agreements, folks might know a little bit about this, different neighborhood associations. So these are neighborhood and district security and safety services who would be involved in this and sign on to good neighbor agreements with the city and potential provider. So sites are staffed and managed 24 hours a day. Once a letter of intent is processed, city staff will meet with surrounding neighborhood associations and other stakeholders to finalize the good neighbor agreement. So that's kind of a process of how we go about that. Taking into account geographic patterns, on-site service provider will patrol 1,000-foot perimeter approximately surrounding the site 16 hours a day, every day. So that's just 2 staff members to patrol the surrounding area, just being mindful of just what's going on in the surrounding perimeter. So there's no effect basically of the site being sited in that one specific location, safety concerns, trash, hazardous waste materials, camping, any of those kinds of issues. So a service provider will engage regularly with the surrounding residents, businesses, and ESDs, the enhanced service districts, just whatever's in the surrounding area. So that's a regular engagement process. And part of that process is also a 24/7 hotline that will be staffed by a service provider on site for complaints or questions just about the site or the process or the service provider policies. about the site itself, but also about the perimeter issues, noise, trash, anything like that folks see happening in the surrounding area. The city will also sponsor $250,000 for each neighborhood and business district to acquire private security. So these are the surrounding business districts or neighborhoods for the natural gathering areas around the site. So main streets, transit stops, other places like that where that makes sense. So that's going to be site specific, and that will be something that we work with the surrounding neighborhood association or business district on. And the goal of 1,000 feet for no camping perimeter around the site. So that's something that obviously the service provider and then city staff and the relevant like bureaus and partners will work with folks on the ground to ensure. So trash cleanup as well is huge for that 1,000-foot perimeter. So at least weekly, and then obviously removing hazardous material immediately. Part of that is the service provider doing that regular 16-hour-a-day walk and just knowing that perimeter inside and out and knowing all the residents and neighboring businesses as well.
All right, next slide. Oh, so let's go through, today we're just for time and to be able to capture the questions so we can continue to polish this. Let's go to any of your follow-up questions so far, and then we have related questions that you asked last week that we've tried to answer in these first slides, but might be a little bit outside of these specific sort of categories. So thanks for bringing that. We got our numbers, our cell numbers. Texting is probably a good way to reach us. Did you send? Oh, so we're going to send this. We'll email this out to you tomorrow morning. I know that a number of you have asked for that. Then we'll also ask you if you have any final thoughts. So you'll get this slideshow tomorrow morning. We might make some small changes to it based on questions you asked tonight. Yes, so sorry for the delay in that. We're going to answer questions related to designated camping sites for now, and we can answer the other questions one-on-one. Yes, there's last week's was recorded like this one, and you can find it here on the YouTube channel that's in the chat under Mayor Wheeler's name. Perhaps too soon. Why don't you take this question?
Yeah, so Lenovo asked perhaps too soon to ask this question, but what will the responsibility be of the individual camper for adherence to rules, cleanup, job seeking, and why are we allowing pets? So as to the individual responsibility of the camper, the service provider in question will establish rules for the camp that each camper will have to follow. So number of service providers we've talked to establish those rules, and those are just necessary rules to live by while being a resident of the camp and receiving those services. So that will just be a contract that the resident signs with the service provider that will include a list of those rules and regulations.
And again, for those of you that are new, our goal here is once we get a property owner that is at least initially willing to further discuss leasing their land for a designated camping site, and we're interested in the site, we're going to sign what is a letter of intent, which is a non-binding agreement. And it's at that point then that we will reach out to and involve the surrounding communities of that site to work through a good neighbor agreement, as we mentioned in an earlier slide, where you will be able to see what are the rules for living in a particular designated camping site.
And as for pets, a lot of folks that we engage with, we kind of mentioned earlier, 80% of folks saying no, on average, saying no to congregate shelter. One of the big reasons people say no is because they have pets. So one of the perks of a designated camping area is having space and then available infrastructure to build space for dog runs or pet containment areas. So people could actually bring their pets with them.
So we actually want a certain number of people that want to come to these designated camping sites so that we can connect them with services if they have issues that need to be addressed. So it's another example of pets in terms of a lot of folks, as Sky said, won't go into any kind of shelter because they don't want to leave their pets behind. What does sustainable and untapped workforce development means? Among other things, it's about lived experience, recovery from some of the issues that can really be a trigger for finding oneself houseless outdoors. So trained, obviously, in addition to their recovery from houselessness and potentially other issues. So that's I guess, a bureaucratic way of saying lived experience.
So Zach asks, there have been many safety issues with the Safe Rest Villages, which have a staff resident ratio much higher than 1 to 15, staff to client. And what are your comments on the qualifications of the staff versus the quantity? So I do think a staff ratio in all of our conversations with various providers is really important. A staff ratio ensures security. We will go into this in the later slide, but one of the providers we're talking to had a 15 to 1 staff ratio, and the 911 calls at that site in the surrounding area were reduced by 90% because they have people who can answer needs of their clients at every moment of every day, and they're doing welfare checks on those clients, and they're really keyed into all those different needs of that specific resident. So it really does make a difference.
And Bridget suggests the location, the Metro Expo Center, back parking lot, and we'll be answering a question about potential sites on Metro Park property in a minute. Tiffany, hi Tiffany, we'll get to that presentation tomorrow. And Tim asks, under what zoning designation and city program guidelines do you expect these camping sites to be developed and operated, e.g. as outdoor shelters as defined by 2021 shelter to housing continuum reforms, or as state-defined campgrounds, rest areas, or others?
So they're going to be temporary shelter sites, so they fall under kind of that emergency shelter space. So I can dive in more to that, Tim, if you want to email me. We've had discussions with our city attorney as well on that. So there's kind of specific zoning laws around a state of emergency for shelter.
And there's a number of different kinds of flavors of state emergencies. There's a mayoral state emergency, which this would fall under some of it. And then the city council, as many of you might know on this call, updated the city council housing emergency a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
$250,000 a year for as long as the sites are in existence would be the idea. So obviously that needs to go through council, but we have agreement on the council that that's a necessary part of security of the surrounding area.
And we're looking for these sites to be in place for 3 years. That's the what, in terms of what we're talking to property owners about.
Yeah, that's the timeline.
Scott asks, if by your survey of only 7 in 10 people will agree to move off the street and accept city services, then what resources and tools does the city have for moving the other 30%, 3,000 people? This 30% likely includes the ones most in need of getting off the streets, either for their safety because of mental illness and or ours because of crime and violence. So one of the resolutions talk about enforcement and creating a diversion program. We don't want to load up folks that might have minor infractions or offenses on their record with more. So enforcement, which we'll go into in greater detail with our colleague Stephanie on our team later on. Today we're focused on sites, but we're working with the DA and other experts to create every chance we can on enforcement to both enforce this, to not overly criminalize it, and to really connect people at every chance we can to services for issues that they might be facing, health, mental, substance abuse disorder.
People in our neighborhood have expressed to us, the neighborhood association, that they have confusion about where to turn with concerns that they've had historically around camping. And I'm wondering if the city plans to create any kind of FAQ type materials for neighborhoods regarding who to contact, and concerns with physical safety for themselves and houseless neighbors to connect houseless individuals with various supports and report dangerous conditions. So thank you so much for that question. We're also going to dive into that. We got a similar one in our additional questions slides, but just the highlights are that 24/7 hotline that will be on every site, staffed by that provider to answer any questions or concerns. We also have PDX reporter and 311 that serve as kind of the city hotline for any of these potential concerns. And then we also have a team called the Street Services Coordination Center that the mayor instituted with an emergency declaration earlier this year that focuses on coordinating a lot of these services and connections. So deals with a lot of those complaints and reports and is able to address those subsequently.
And our plans are to obviously we'll have meetings in these neighborhoods, but as time goes on, we'll be regularly leafleting within the 1,000-foot perimeter, at least around these camps, with the contact information. Again, that includes a cell phone number of someone who's in the camp at the time that an individual is calling, so they can deal with issues as quickly, not have to necessarily be delayed with 911 or 311 trying to get through to somebody. We know that's really important to you, and it's been a key part of our assumptions. Yeah. When do you hope to implement this plan? Tomorrow, the City Council will vote on $27 million fund that is a down payment on the total cost of this. The mayor met today with County Chair-elect Jessica Vega Peterson, and also met with Governor-elect Tina Kotek, asking them for resources, both in terms of in-kind services, but also investments. We're also working with the current Multnomah County Chair, Deborah Kafori, for resources as well. But that $27 million, just 2 weeks after the resolutions were passed, shows the seriousness that we're taking this and the speed of, getting the basics up, like sites. That's why these outreach calls are happening. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can that the surrounding community around these camps feels safe and secure.
So it's what will the requirements be for admission? Glenn asks. So it's a low barrier shelter, but it's going to be for adults, and then folks can't be a clear and present danger to themselves or others. But it's also something that we'll work with the service provider on, and then in a good neighbor agreement as well. So those are kind of the main barriers that we see. It's intended to be a low barrier shelter for folks so they can access it.
And we have a slide that goes into a little more detail in it. Chris asked, parks are precious and limited open spaces. They're also muddy and wet much of the year. That seems neither safe nor sanitary. Are you limiting your potential use of parks to paved areas? We're looking at a whole bunch of sites right now beyond the 7 that we're in active conversations with, because again, I don't know that all of them are going to come through, but we are definitely going to make sure that these camps are not muddy and either paved or have the right kind of surfacing so that they don't just pool water as well.
Andy asked, what size and type of tent are you purchasing? Eskimo tents are not waterproof. So excellent point. That's part of this process, is talking to a potential service provider, talking to other service providers in the area and seeing what works. We've also been talking to different jurisdictions that have designated camping sites and what tents have worked for them in different climates. So it's part of our due diligence, and we'll definitely be looking into those different materials.
All right, I'm going to take a pause on the reading of questions and go over some additional questions that were raised last week. Next slide, please.
So Garland from last week asked, what are we going to do with the remaining thousands of unhoused individuals who won't find a home within the limited capacity the mayor's office is planning for in these unsanctioned camping spots? So we're helping more people who are living outside to become self-sufficient by better addressing their physical ailments, mental illness, and substance abuse, and improving their non-standard work options as well, and navigating them to housing and care coordination, as well as catalyzing affordable housing units, so tens of thousands of affordable housing units. But we're also adding to a continuum that already exists. So We're not replacing something, we're actually just adding more shelter spots to something that already, to a shelter continuum that's already in existence.
And I just want to underscore, we realize the fact that not every person in Portland experiencing outdoor houselessness have physical, mental, or substance abuse issues. We know that, but the numbers show, and again, you can go see our research on the mayor's website, but the numbers show a growing number of folks do. And that's why it's a public health emergency. It's a humanitarian emergency. Next slide. So Ken asks, since this is an emergency crisis, is there a triage plan for priority entry into these camps? So the designated campsites are intended, as Skye mentioned, for use by unsheltered adult population. There's a different set of shelters for families with children. This would be for the adult population. The city's Street Services Coordination Center that the mayor created under emergency decree 8 months ago now, will be the place that the 50 new houseless outreach workers will reside, and they'll be trained to match clients with the best available services and shelter options. So not every outreach worker will necessarily think that a designated camping area is the best option for an individual, and will be trained to trained to match clients with the best services or other shelter housing options available. Next slide, please.
From Tom, would drug markets be allowed in the 1,000-foot zone? Why do safe rest villages get 150 feet and these camps get 1,000 feet exclusion zones? So no, drug markets will not be allowed. And then safe rest villages are significantly smaller sites than these designated camping sites. So fewer people and therefore have a narrower perimeter around them. We recognize that these designated camping sites have up to 150 people to start. And so we're doing a larger perimeter around the outside of this site. Next slide, please. So Zach asks, what will the city response be when an individual is excluded from a campsite because that person is a clear and present danger to themselves or others? So different options depending on the situation that arises and kind of what the individual we're dealing with and what their needs are in that present moment. But those options include PPB's behavioral health unit and then Portland Street Response as well. So trained mental health professionals, behavioral health professionals. Also, Multnomah County will be opening a new behavioral health resource center the next few weeks. And our diversion program that Sam mentioned that we're designing is aimed at connecting people with services through a series of warnings and civil citations to get some expungement of low-level offenses and really get people into the mental and behavioral health services they need.
Next slide, please. So Brittany asks, we know that social service staffing shortages are at a historic high. Has the city done due diligence to confirm that there is sufficient provider capacity to realize the offers that are being made, will be made to connect houseless individuals to services for housing, et cetera? So our goal here, Brittany, this overall project is to increase the availability of public health services to those experiencing houselessness and to co-locate them so that we can bring them closer to those services. And there's reason for hope. As I mentioned, the mayor met with Governor-elect Tina Kotek and Chair-elect Jessica Vega-Peterson, who've endorsed these proposals, and they both understand. And the Governor-elect, as you know, many of you might know, proposed a statewide emergency declaration to help address unsheltered homelessness across Oregon. We're not the only city that's facing it, and part of what her emergency powers are is to streamline and redirect state services that are most often then on the ground managed by counties across Oregon. And then the mayor is already working with both to fully fund these resolutions, to co-locate or to focus social services at these sites. So we're out there fundraising, we're out there pitching for services. We've got new leadership, and the whole goal is to get what services there are, and hopefully more, co-located at these designated sites. Next slide, please.
So also from Garland from last week, why don't we use the expo center as a shelter to house the remainder of folks? So that was also asked in a chat tonight. So the mayor has asked Metro for any sites that might be available for a designated camping site. So those conversations are ongoing.
Next slide. Steve asks, will any of the 6 campsites be gender specific? Possibly, and we're discussing creating gender specific shelter sites as part of the Safe Rest Village Continuum as well, and other programs. But we're definitely looking at that. It's too early to tell, too early to provide you a definitive answer yet, Steve. Thanks for raising it.
Next slide, please. So Sally asked, why not use state of emergency calling in FEMA, the National Guard, and Red Cross to build, set up for food, campsites, hygiene, and National Guard as peacekeepers, and Red Cross for health. One set up call in local mental health and addiction services from nonprofits, the city, the county, etc. So we're in discussions with the county chair-elect, like Sam mentioned, and the governor-elect on collaboration for use of any available resources. So part of that state of emergency that a governor has is reallocating resources to meet that emergent need, and that state of emergency would be on unsheltered houselessness. So except maybe for the initial camp construction, we're not contemplating using the National Guard at designated camping sites. So, you know, the National Guard and other emergency services within the state can be really useful, as Sally kind of mentions here in her question, for construction and just emergency management. They have a lot of expertise in that. However, we're not looking to use the National Guard at designated camping sites for staffing.
And I guess we can also add, so since I've been back in City Hall, one of the first things we looked at was FEMA, potential a federal emergency declaration to help cities across the United States, Portland and others, to get emergency FEMA assistance. And the answer was no, it's not available. The outdoor houseless camping, from what we've been told and our lawyers have been able to research, does not meet the federal emergency criteria for a FEMA declaration. I don't know why it should, but next slide, please.
Steve asks, will there be waiting lists for particular sites? So the city's Street Services Coordination Center will work with all of the homeless service providers to determine operational details, such as using shelter waiting lists. That works in some cases. It also doesn't work in others. So it really is going to be program specific and service provider specific.
Next slide. Chris asked, will there be parking for these large camps, or will they be parking on the streets surrounding the camps? To reduce the need for parking, the ideal designated camp, as we mentioned, is serviced by transit. And we're looking to, we don't have it funded, but we're looking for transportation as well. So folks can go from the camp to the various sort of clinics and other work and other options. So we're looking at that. The option for on-site auto parking will be determined based on site specific parameters. So some sites we're talking to owners about might accommodate on-site parking for the residents. Other sites might not. And as we look to match folks with the best designated camping site and they have a car, then obviously through the Street Services Coordination Center, we would obviously point them to a site where there was car parking. Parking by residents of the designated campsites will not be allowed to park within 1,000 feet perimeter of the camp. Next slide.
So someone last week wrote, can you provide us a cost analysis to compare housing, 1,500 people versus tent camps for 1,500 people over a 3 to 6 month period? Why are you spending time and money on locating campsites when you could be spending money on locating sites that can be quickly converted to affordable housing? So just some points from our research. A recent snapshot analysis that Sam mentioned earlier from Home Forward indicates that wait lists for some affordable housing units can average 5 to 10 years in Portland. Part of this overall proposal by the mayor is to address the affordable housing crisis and shorten this wait time for affordable housing, but without including the cost of social services. Construction of one affordable housing unit in Portland costs on average $490,000. Without including the cost of social services, construction of one designated tent site is approximately $14,000. So while people are waiting for affordable housing units, and as we construct and catalyze those 20,000 of affordable housing units that we mentioned earlier by 2033, we want to provide folks with more opportunities for connection to services and sanitation and navigation to transitional housing, or whatever services make the most sense for them.
And obviously, it's really important to point out the obvious that the lifespan of a housing unit is a lot longer than the lifespan of a tent site. But that was the question that was asked. So with that proviso. Next slide. Ilse asks, will there be a time limit on how long campers can stay, such as 1 year? To start, in terms of length of stay, we're not contemplating a strict time limit. We really, though, by using the Built for Zero client-centered health improvement model, we hope to find people better ways forward for themselves. But it is why we're using the Built for Zero model, which is confidentially takes people's information and allows us to help track their progress in getting any sort of help that they might need. And obviously, as this gets up and running, the Street Services Coordination Center will refine this answer, but that's our starting point answer to this. Let's go back to the chat. Let's see, where were we? Somewhere over here. I don't want this in. Sorry, didn't get me back to where I was. We did that one. All right, we'll start here. We missed a question. During past discussions with neighbors and the Joint Office of Homeless Services City regarding shelter size, service providers revealed that 90 to 110 people is optimal upper limit and to ensure sufficient care. The proposal to limit camps initially to 100 people is close to this limit. Why not expand a number of sites and keep the camps limited to 100 people? So safe villages are an important part of the next sort of step in the continuum of care for folks experiencing outdoor houselessness. And so as the Street Services Coordination Center puts together, as these come online, we'll be able to sort of refine the difference between and what it means to go from a designated camping site to a safe rest village. And we'll be able to, and it depends on how much we're able to acquire in terms of resources for services. We'll refine it as we move forward.
There's also a difference with local service providers often having a different ratio than 15:1. It's often much higher than a 15:1 staff client ratio. So that also makes a difference of how you're able to manage and secure a certain number of people above 100. So some of those ratios are some of those statements are based on the ratios that we see in congregate shelter in Portland.
So you're saying sometimes the number of people one person takes care of is a higher number of people?
Yes. So in congregate shelter, it can range between 40 to 45 clients to one staff member. A lot of the models that we've seen that have been really successful with designated camping sites have that 15:1 staff ratio to client to staff ratio. So that's just a significantly larger number of staff to be there 24/7 and secure the area and deal with client needs. So it's just a different model, frankly, than what we've seen in other situations.
So Tom asks about how people are going to be fed, and we mentioned that there will be meals provided. Zach has another question.
Do either of you know what ACP is, and has there been any city efforts toward helping unhoused folks access ACP funds? Every single unhoused person is entitled to them. Yes, Zach. So please email me or call me with my email or number in the chat. I have been having those discussions and would love to talk to you further. Thanks.
But I mean, part of getting more folks co-located, signed up to services like ACP that they're entitled to.
Yeah, or OHP or all the other kind of services that already are in existence.
Yeah. matching.
Yeah, that was something else.
Oh, I see. Go ahead.
So BARBAS Built for Zero is a way to track your homeless community members. It is not transparent. What if someone won't give their name and a birth date or whatever? So currently with shelter sites, you're required to give your name and birthday. So that's kind of just part of the system. They have to know who they're serving. The federal government with federal money requires us to enter into information into HMIS, which is the Federal Data Management Service. And so that information is required just for sheltering in general. We have to know who we're serving.
So that the requirement of the Built for Zero way seemed like a shock to some folks. Our earlier conversation about including that, but it already is a feature of a lot of shelter opportunities. Are you going to schedule listening sessions with the unhoused community and ask and allow to ask questions? Yes. First, we're working on trying to get some sites selected, but we're also raising money from city government, the mayor itself, and from other providers. And then absolutely, we'll be having gatherings of providers to talk to them. Also gathering of folks that have lived experience being unhoused.
And Tim asked, what are the sites, programs, and service providers in LA or elsewhere that you consider the closest models to what you're envisioning? So we visited I visited two sites in LA and San Francisco that are great models. So that provider is Urban Alchemy. We're also talking to other providers and planning to visit Denver, Salt Lake City. We've talked to Austin, Texas as well. There's just different providers doing different things and trying different things. Vancouver, Washington as well. So we're talking to folks all over the country, as well as kind of our counterparts in other cities across the country of what's working and what's not.
Zach says this is a very non-democratic local government meeting. Well, Zach, we're here to get advice. We're here to talk to folks that are leaders in their communities and we want every neighborhood or business district or community-based organization to imagine that one of the sites are in your part of town. And we want to make sure that we have the on-the-ground perspective of the host communities. And then we'll be reaching out to other stakeholders I've already mentioned as well.
We were asked, it says no alcohol or drugs in the common areas. Does that mean they can use alcohol and drugs in their tents? No, but that's also site service provider specific. So it'll depend on folks doing welfare checks and really checking in with those clients. But laying those ground rules are really important.
All right, Lisa Loving. Hi, Lisa. The bigger issue is not what some people do not want to shelter. Some people do not want to shelter. The bigger issue is that rent is so damn high. Is the city working to fix this? Multi-designations before a whole raft of new ones expire. So we are tomorrow part of the budget package that was proposed by the housing commissioner, Dan Ryan. Dan Saltzman is somebody else, a different commissioner, Dan Ryan. Is to set aside money for eviction prevention. We've also been working with the county for them and they are looking at eviction prevention investment as well. We talked to the governor-elect today about this issue as well. And again, this is a 4-part program, and the top of it is expediting the building of more affordable housing here in the city of Portland, 20,000 units in the next 10 years.
Steve said, many of these homeless people have vehicles that I doubt they will give up. What is the plan for parking these vehicles? So again, I think we kind of mentioned that on one of these slides from a previous question from last week, but there will be certain sites maybe that have more parking availability, depending, it's going to just be site specific. So if someone has a car, they'd be more apt to go to one of those sites, and those outreach workers will know which sites those are. But we'll also make sure that those cars are not able to park in the surrounding perimeter in the neighborhoods or business districts.
Andy O asked a good question. Commissioner Myron has proposed smaller villages on property owned by faith organizations. Will these projects continue to receive public support? That is definitely our intention. We need to be offering a variety of different sort of shelter options. the key there is to have enough services so that all those shelters, projects, aren't just warehousing people, but are actually making the connections to the services they need. But I know a lot of faith organizations are interested in doing this, and the county will continue to support them. And Commissioner Myron stays on the county board as well. All right, another question about the Expo Center. Do you want to read this?
So the Expo Center was a stop for Japanese people being incarcerated during World War II. Go check out the Max Station art at the Expo Center for more on that. Yep, thank you, Lisa. We're aware of that too.
Maria asked, can you please provide a link to the research you're referring to? Yeah, in the email tomorrow, we'll include the resolutions, have the citations on the resolutions that the 5 resolutions have citations and links to the research. Barb asked, does Bill for Zare include FEMA anywhere? No.
No, unfortunately it does not. So Kelly asked, feedback from people on the campsites is important. We want to hear their feedback so we can know what's working well for them and problems we can work on. What's the plan for that process and ombudsman? So yep, that's definitely an important part of this process. And it also will be something we do in partnership with a potential service provider. So building that process, making sure folks are able to say what they need and say what's working and what's not. It'll be an iterative process of building these designated camping sites and seeing what works and what doesn't.
All right. Andio asks again, assuming 600 platforms need to be built for these projects, perhaps we should start building them? Yes, as soon as we get a site and as soon as we ink good neighbor agreements to the folks around that'll be living in the communities, working in the communities around the sites.
And Tim asked, could these camping sites allow steps towards housing, such as hosting trailers, RVs, tiny homes on wheels, and potentially support pathways for these to relocate, for example, to be hosted on private residences as allowed by sheltered housing continuum or to become accessory dwelling units. So yeah, we're looking at all opportunities for transitional housing, and I actually met with someone yesterday who is building a prototype for one of those kind of ADU pod situations. So we currently use pallet shelters at the Safe Rest Villages, but there are other companies that are diving into that mix and having really creative ideas and solutions to those problems. So we're always looking for new opportunities and new ideas and seeing what works.
Marianne asked, hi Marianne, are you looking for parking areas for people who prefer to live in their car RV? Yes, we are.
Donna says, saying the cost of affordable housing must be $490,000 shows an incredible lack of imagination, knowledge about other alternatives. There are many small options out there. So yep, we are aware of those and we totally know those different options. We're actually exploring a lot of those options. We built some of those options. So totally aware of that, Donna. Thank you. And that's definitely a caveat. So we were just specifically answering the question that was asked last week, but there's definitely more conversation about the other pieces to that puzzle.
Barb asked about training. Yeah, part of the requirements to be a shelter operator, provider, services provider will be training, mental health, peers, those kinds of things.
And our SSCC team also is composed of outreach workers and firefighters and folks who have that training and experience with behavioral and mental health issues and first responder training as well. Jody asks, most of ODOT who are working from the Garrett building in downtown, maybe that building could be converted to affordable housing via coordination with the state of Oregon. So I think, yeah, asking about conversion, we're looking at all options. Again, we met with the governor-elect today. So all of those options for conversion or different sites, please send our way and we'll run them down and see what's possible.
Melanie asked, can people bring their own tents and household items?
So Melanie, that's going to be dependent kind of on what we decide with the service provider, but my guess is that we would provide our own kind of tents or materials just so we know that they're weatherproof, like we mentioned earlier, and can really beat the elements during all seasons. But that would be a conversation too to have with the service provider, their own items and personal items, household items, like you said, can be put in their tent and also in storage that we mentioned will be on site as well. And then we also have, which some people might not know, but we store belongings for folks for free for 30 days, and we can extend that longer right now. So we already have some of those storage opportunities.
This is Zach's back at it. I like democracy and discussion, Zach. This is shameful. This might as well be a YouTube video. They have at least cherry pick questions from last week to address. Moderating incoming questions over a week is awful. I'm reading your comments and yeah.
Donna in the chat says, I hope everyone checks out the letter from the Mental Health Association of Portland in the current street routes. It's online. Definitely seen it. So encourage others to read it as well. Thanks.
Far from Andy O, far from shameful, Sam brings a thoughtful, open, time-tested set of skills. Please stay focused on helping to educate these folks. That's very nice of you, Andy. I appreciate that. TJ Brown.
Hey, TJ. TJ says, you have identified mental health and drugs as contributing factors to homelessness. Also, the lack of social workers or social services has been acknowledged as a statewide problem, and you've discussed this with the governor-elect. What about the drug issue? This is also a statewide crisis. Any discussion with Governor-elect Cote about revising Measure 110? So definitely some conversations about the drug crisis on our streets. I think we're all very aware of what's going on and just the lack of services for folks as well. So part of Measure 110 was that funding for services. And so we're really hoping to get that really in our communities and actually invest in our communities, kind of like it was promised. So I think we're really excited about to see that at work. And then we're also working on other potential solutions because we're seeing kind of the effects on the ground as well.
So Governor-elect Kotek mentioned making improvements to ballot measure 110, and it's the other thing that I will sort of recap. So the mayor a year ago founded a coalition of Oregon mayors to lobby the state legislature on key issues like we're talking about today. And that coalition has asked the Coalition of City Mayors in Oregon and asked the governor for $150 million to help cities to provide better shelter to help connect more people to services. So Mayor Wheeler is working obviously for the bosses of the city of Portland, but he's also joined with other mayors to help other cities in Oregon as well.
So Barb said, wait, so if I am one of the big tent camps, do I have to go to a safe rest village before getting housed? No, Barb, that's just one option. So the idea again is to create as many options as we can for folks along the continuum and then to match them with whatever services make the most sense. So some folks might move from a designated camping site to a safe rest village or to transitional housing or to an apartment. It really just is going to be person specific and resident specific. So that's why that client-centered approach is so important and why we need that data for Built for Zero about like what each client needs and who they've been matched with. And they'll also have hopefully some care coordination. So folks who can kind of walk them through that process and meet with those clients individually.
Donna asked, please list all the sites you're using as models on the city's website so we can evaluate for ourselves. We can do that. We've also spent months reaching out to folks in other cities that have responsibilities for policies and operations and programs to get lessons learned and insights on these larger designated camping sites. And that kind of sharing and learning network that we've created, we're going to continue to consult with in addition to obviously our folks here in Portland and Oregon.
Andy says, please include OHSU, the VA, Legacy, Providence, Zoom Care in an effort to offer confidential assessments. Definitely will do that. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, good suggestion. Ken and Joanne asks, what is host communities say no to internment camps in their neighborhoods? We are having these conversations and upfront in these meetings. You know, there is a possibility that we don't end up closing a deal on a particular site, but we are working up front and again, trying to get everyone in the mindset. Imagine one of these designated camping sites is going to be near where you live, work, or play, because we want them to be safe. We want them to be effective. So it's possible that not everyone, the council doesn't approve, the mayor doesn't approve every possible site that we have a letter of agreement with, but we're working hard to get as much acceptance as we possibly can.
Donna says the report on the town hall, the street routes arranged for you and the mayor to attend seems to indicate that folks you spoke with are not in support of the plan. Any comment? So yeah, thanks, Donna. So I was at that town hall with Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Ryan. We're really grateful that Street Roots and the Blanchet House put that together. We're looking to further conversations as well. And a lot of those comments were about connecting folks with services. We're also about security and storage. And so some of the themes that really helped influence kind of some of these policies and proposals. And we'll continue to have those conversations. It's iterative and we're still working on that organization. But I actually had a conversation today with someone from that town hall who is sending me some of his own ideas, and he's formerly unhoused and was speaking at that town hall. So we're definitely still having those conversations, and we really look forward to future conversations as well.
This one's to you.
Oh, Tim, Skylar. There are many and varied sites and programs in all of those cities you mentioned. It would help us to understand if you could say specifically which. Yes, so I can give a detailed list, but I probably can't remember them all off the top of my head right now. There's definitely the Safe Stay program. They all have similar names, so I might mix this up, but there's a Safe Stay program in Vancouver, and we're talking to those folks regularly. We're also talking to Seattle regularly about their various shelter options and kind of what they're determining. San Francisco had a designated camping site. LA has a designated camping site right now. LA also has their version of a safe rest village, which is like a pod village as well, with more pods kind of than we have with our safe rest village site. So we talked to those folks. I've met with my counterpart in Austin, Texas, just about the different pieces of what they're working on. Not exactly analogous to this, but they're interested in what we learn and we're interested in what they learn. So we're sharing that information. I also meet monthly with the federal homelessness organization agency. They convene a West Coast cities like homelessness policy advisor discussion. And so we actually met this week and heard what Hawaii is doing. So my counterpart in Hawaii. So I'm happy to list more programs, but we definitely have those conversations a lot. We're also talking to different programs within Oregon. So Medford has a really interesting progressive approach to some of their camping areas. That kind of goes from a designated camping site to kind of the safe rest village model to transitional housing. And so that's been interesting to learn about. Houston has an interesting model as well. So we're definitely learning from folks all around the country.
Cam says, wouldn't it be a better use of time to have sent these as written answers? Well, we kind of wanted to get all the follow-up questions as well. This is a complex issue. And so we can do a lot of Q&A using the chat feature. But we will send out the written answers of the current PowerPoint to you tomorrow. Zach is still interesting cherry pickings of my comments. Sam, allow people to speak on camera. We have 47 more questions or comments here, Zach. So we're going to be efficient and stick with the chat feature.
Oh, thanks for including that report, Donna, in the chat. Appreciate that.
And I wasn't there. I was at a family function for the town hall at Street Roots, but
I was there.
Yeah. I just had a common looking face. Go ahead.
Donna said, completely agree with Tim. We need to know the names, info on the model programs you say you are using to help in the planning. The community needs this information. The successful programs with which I am familiar, many do not include large encampments. Yep, so Donna, I've talked to the programs I just mentioned, but you're right, a lot of them don't have necessarily the size or the scope, and that's why we mentioned all those specifics about our ideal model with the staffing ratio of 15:1 really makes a big difference for that.
Kelly asks, as part of the plan, can we ask campers where they would like campsites located? How do they imagine living in certain neighborhoods? Definitely when we get those sort of letter of intents before we make agreements, but where we have some sense of interest from landowners, yeah, we'll definitely take feedback from folks that are unhoused in Portland about specific sites. And we've, with our outreach workers, we've continued to ask folks, you know, what kind of amenities they would like to see at places that they could camp. And so we'll continue that outreach process as well. And you asked what size platforms are you planning for and how far apart will they need to be? We will get back to you with an answer on that. And then Donna puts in the chat, here's a letter from the Mental Health Association. Appreciate that.
And Tim says, how does one get on the mailing list for these meetings and follow-up materials? Could requested materials be posted in one place online? Yep, we will post it on our website as well, Tim. This meeting was convened for, as Sam mentioned, neighborhood associations, business districts, ESTs, and the like. There will be future meetings as well, but we'll definitely post the materials on our website. Caitlin said, you said you met with Urban Alchemy. Who did you meet with? Was it their CEO, Jeff Kaczynski, who's in charge of their national expansion, or workers, trainers, etc.? I would like to know more about what happened during your visits to LA and San Francisco. Sure. So yes, I do know Jeff. Jeff Kaczynski used to be with San Francisco, running kind of their Healthy Streets Operations Center, which is kind of similar in scope to the SSCC here. And now he works for Urban Alchemy. They also have a pretty large leadership team. So in LA, we met with Kirkpatrick Tyler, who does a lot of their media and training of staff. And then I meet regularly with them. I've gotten to know them well after visits in San Francisco and LA. I just also want to mention we're talking to other service providers as well. So they really have taught us a lot, and I consider them friends now. But we are also learning from folks in our local community, and those conversations are ongoing as well.
So Tim thinks you're speaking too fast.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a bad habit, Tim. I apologize.
I suggest you turn on the live transcript feature, like I'm watching right now as well.
My apologies, Tim. I'll try to speak more slowly.
Once again, Lenovo asks, once again, while I understand the service providers will develop their policies, what is the city going to do with respect to rules for campers? Again, those will be clear and ironed out, and those will be transparent about that when we talk to neighborhoods and business districts and folks that live, work, and play around these sites. Let's see, go ahead.
Mari asks, this plan is extremely troublesome. Mandating already traumatized housing refugees to large encampments with 200 plus people is dehumanizing. Having worked in mental health with mental health patients, we're sequestered from drug and alcohol patients. Mixing these populations will exacerbate those who are traumatized and experiencing mental illness. Trauma victims, sorry, also just need to talk personally. Trauma victims need to be removed from the trauma-inducing environment. Trying to treat them in the same environment that has harmed them is ineffective. So definitely appreciate that trauma-informed approach. Thank you for that comment. I think we definitely recognize that the designated camping sites will not be right for everyone. If you will be traumatized by being in a larger site, that site obviously isn't for you. There are other sheltering options and housing options that we can offer, and other services that folks might need, especially if they have those mental health and behavioral health issues.
The repeated questions I'm going to skip over. So if we've already answered them. So, we've already, Marie asked about 27 million would be better spent on building these folks in buildings with appropriate professional service providers when necessary, and we've already spoke to that. The variety, we want to offer variety, and we get a lot of requests from houseless folks for a place that they can camp outside. What is the timetable for selecting sites? Working on it every day. So the LOI part of it,
Letter of intent.
The letter of intent part, which is not site selection, but initial site evaluation. You know, I'm hoping you'll start hearing about that in days, not months. We're working hard at it.
Ken and Joanne said, we asked this last week, but it didn't seem to be addressed. will there be an equity lens applied to where the internment camps are being placed? Will poor people be in turn siloed and working class people and expected to be resilient with no resources? Also for some diverse neighborhoods with immigrant and refugee communities and lived experience, with concentration camps, internment camps, detention centers, living in the midst of a police internment camp will be very triggering and traumatic. So yeah, back to Marie's point as well. I think it'll be really important for folks to understand, and service providers and outreach workers to understand what will be the triggers for certain individuals, and what designated camping sites might be right for one person and may not be the right service for another person.
Ken Thrasher asks, when it's 20 degrees outside, what happens in these shelters made up of tents? Is there a warming center in each of them? So we were either looking at tents that can be heated. We're looking at also warming centers as an option as well. So we will answer that, and we're working with equipment providers and the providers themselves to get the best answers to that question about heat.
Claire says, with no strict time limit, what reason do these people have to find alternative housing? You hope people find a better way forward, free Wi-Fi, food, etc. Many Portland residents don't have money for Wi-Fi and food. So the idea is to get folks connected with services and really get on the pathway to housing. These are folks who are living unsheltered currently on the streets of Portland. So the Wi-Fi is important for folks to get connected to employment and stay connected to employment and have connection to their job as well.
The next question is Scoter. Sorry if we skipped your question. We went back to these chat questions. Thanks for reposting. How will the contracting process happen for service providers and private security? Will there be an RFP? What will the process be? Transparent to the public? Do you have potential contractors you've already talked to? If so, who are they and what did they talk about what did we talk about during those conversations? Yes, there will be an RFP process, an RFI process for potential providers, and we'll also be meeting with them to discuss before the RFP goes out, to discuss and get their input as well. And yes, that'll be, this is all public record, be a public process. Caitlin, another question. Reposting a previous question from.
Oh, yeah, we answered that.
Yeah, great. All right. Go ahead.
John asks, would residents have the flexibility to create smaller neighborhoods within the camp, say with space and visual barriers between them, so they could surround themselves with others they know, make them feel safe, etc. That's an interesting idea, John, and I think that's definitely something we could talk to with a potential service provider, and also would be site specific. So if there's certain kind of areas that naturally are created and barriers that are naturally created within a site, that might make a lot of sense.
All right. Zach says info up. Yeah, we'll get you the info in terms of citations and the research we've done.
Yeah, and those resolutions, Zach, are already on the website, and those footnotes and those links are already included on the website as well.
I'm going to, for sake of time, of folks that have already asked questions, we have 62 new questions, so I'm going to go to folks that haven't asked a question before.
So Debbie asks, are self-sited encampments defined as 3 tents or more? What happens to less than 3 tents? So when we talk about an encampment on the streets of Portland, when we evaluate them, that is 3 tents or more. We're still assessing those camps that are fewer than 3 tents.
Yeah, I think she's talking about the 800
yes.
camps we define, just for purposes of counting. This would be a ban on camping, no matter what size, at 1 tent, 3 tents or more. But just in terms of, so when we said, up to 800 camps, that we defined a camp for the purposes of that. 800 camps cost 146 square miles is 3 tents or more. That's all right. Mother and child, thank you. All right, We're going to have outreach to folks with lived experience and houselessness. Thanks, Kimbra, for the comment. Okay, so Ann asked, for the record, our neighborhood supports alternative shelter housing models, but our neighborhood, which is one of the poorest and most diverse neighborhoods, already has a motel shelter and a low-barrier congregate shelter and an SRV and 2 permanent supportive housing developments for people impacted by houselessness. So who should be speaking to you about concerns so you make decisions regarding locations and understand the ramifications of placing another housing alternative in an area that is already exceeding capacity? That was raised in the last week's chat. And so part of what the slides, if you joined late, we went through is definitely looking at whether adding a designated campsite on top of the already services that you're mentioning, is that just too much? And so that is one of our criteria. And so we are mapping out all the services so that we all can get a sense for that, but very legitimate concern. And thanks for making that point, Ann.
What will be the required credentials for security supervisors, professional staff? Oh, just lost my place. Okay.
What happened?
I don't know. All right, we're sorry. I'm gonna miss that question, but
What's going on?
I don't know.
Our screen, we just
Sorry.
lost our.
Our colleague is controlling the slideshow, so we don't have control over it. We're gonna go back to the chat. Let me just go up a little bit.
All right.
Oh, yeah, go down.
Okay, there is Ann. There we go.
So what will be the required credentials for security supervisors, professional staff? What will be the staffing ratio for 200 camps? So yep, that's the staffing ratio we mentioned is 15:1. And then extensive training depending on your specifics, staffing position also will be required.
All right. So could we campsites? So Tim asked, could we do a public call for ideas, proposals on what kinds of dwelling structures could be allowed or offered at these camping sites, particularly foregrounding suggestions from people presently unhoused and RFPI, request for public involvement? Be sure and attend. So we've noted this suggestion. We'll look into it and be sure if you're someone with lived experience of outdoor houselessness, then when we do outreach, please join that conversation as well.
Zach says, what will be the minimum work qualifications for a case manager or equivalent position at these encampments? So there'll be different service providers kind of on the site, so different positions. So a care coordinator position obviously would need necessary experience and training with the relevant services, also trauma-informed interviewing skills just for folks who have been through those traumatic experiences, and some background in kind of that work, so kind of more of that social worker model, but it'll depend on the staffing position specifically. And
Mariah asked, how do you plan to maintain safety? We've been through that. Are you going to do criminal background checks? No. Are you planning to do drug screenings? No, but we are going to hire service providers that, again, if someone is a danger to themselves or others, then that individual will be taken to a service more appropriate for their needs.
Peter asked, have you approached any local billionaires, Phil Knight, for matching funds? I have not personally, but it's an interesting idea. Thank you, Peter.
If you have Phil Knight's cell phone number, Peter, let me know. Can you drop a link? Oh, yeah. I will put the link and keep it up after we sign off for the website. So you can start reading stuff online right now. Yeah, we saved the chat transcript. Colleen asked, it sounds like the service providers are private companies. My Portland hired different management companies for different campsites, and that the providers make the rules. So that the providers don't make the rules. The city decides on what the rules are. Some providers have a slightly different approach that works for them. So we are going to take that into account. Yes, there could be different service providers for each of these 6 different safe rest villages. And these are generally nonprofit service providers.
Yeah, that's just the general landscape
right now. Vadim, hi Vadim. Thanks for the encouraging words. We have a lot more dialogue to do, along with the slideshow. Yeah, we're happy to save the chat, Janelle, and send it along with the slideshow. And we'll keep updating online this Q&A.
Yep, Donna, we've looked at Emerald Village. Thank you. And please feel free to email me some of those suggestions. I appreciate that.
So Eugene, yeah.
Yeah.
TJ Browning, or TJ asks, since there will be a 3-year lease on each property, is that the intended timeline aspiration for campers moving to housing? Well, hopefully quicker than that. But in terms of a host part of town, one of the practices in other cities is to move these periodically, sort of their camps, so that it isn't just, and that's why we're looking at 3 years, so it isn't just 6 parts of town that are the permanent host for these things. All right.
Thanks for putting that in the chat.
Yeah, our colleague did. So can we get to the next slide? We'll go back.
I don't think we did this one.
Oh.
So Sonia asked last week, as people move towards housing, what efforts are being made to partner with faith communities to assist with mentorship, problem solving for assigned persons? We have been providing Band-Aid services for years and have relationships with regulars. Our experience is a number of these folks get stumped by a problem and then spiral. Having a mentor that can be a sounding board, help identify solutions, from existing community resources could help keep people in housing once they are housed. So yes, is the short answer. But we're also looking to hire a director of charitable services who can connect folks with these services and also connect these sites with these services, and work regularly with faith community and nonprofits and others who are already doing this work and have been doing a really good job of this work and have those relationships with the community. We want to continue those relationships. We want to build on that. And we meet regularly with different nonprofits and also different faith organizations who are really involved in this work and really want to be involved in this work. Just as an example, as I mentioned, we talked to Vancouver and they had charitable organizations create a meal train. So they donated 6 months worth of meals to an alternative shelter site, and all that food was donated for 6 months for all those residents every day. So kind of an incredible example of folks working together to be able to bring services to those sites.
We put so Tim just asked, next slide, sorry. Katie asked, how are you engaged with unhoused people in the creation of this plan? I think we've answered that. It started out and continues with our outreach workers. And then in terms of trauma informed, we talked about that. And we're gonna have outreach meetings like this with all the stakeholders involved in this effort, including those with lived experience of being unhoused. Next slide.
Peter asked, a lot of work went into the Safe Rest Villages, a lot of public hearings, et cetera. Why is this program being started from seemingly scratch versus building on the Safe Rest Village program? Will the Safe Rest Village program continue? The main difference seems to be tents versus hard structure and the number of people. So really appreciate those that question and those comments, Peter. So we're not starting from scratch, I promise. We're leaning into the lessons learned from the Safe Rest Village program, as well as all the programs that I mentioned, and all the providers and different counterparts we have across the country, as well as the state. And the Safe Rest Village team has been instrumental in advising us on different aspects of these proposals in this program, and we'll continue to seek their advice on lessons learned from that program as well. Next slide, please.
Matt asks, the Ninth Circuit ruling on Martin v. Boise specifically includes the word indoor when referring to adequate shelter. How are you going to square that with the proposed camping ban? So in setting up this program, we are following the legal guidance from our city attorney's office. Next slide.
Austin asks, knowing that our PPV is understaffed, will having these localized campsites make it easier or more difficult on them? This is one reason we feel it's really important to have service providers secure the camp and the camp perimeter. So we know that the police bureau is understaffed right now, and they're being strained by the different number of calls, level of calls. So our goal is to have camps with one service provider who can really secure that site and the perimeter. So one example is that one of these sites that we've talked to a provider of said that the relevant police bureau in that site or that city said that when the site was opened, the service provider secured the camp and the surrounding perimeter and had a 90% reduction in the 911 calls that had previously been in that neighborhood and that surrounding area. So we've seen a lot of really compelling evidence to support the security of a site based on the service provider, and especially that staffing model I mentioned of 15-to-1.
Next slide. Big ask, what is the chance of using eminent domain to use some empty or even partially empty apartments? Not apartments, but if necessary for designated campsites, the city may use eminent domain to acquire property for lease or for purchase. We have to pay for it at market rate. And one of the designated, one of the safe rest villages was acquired with friendly condemnation. So that is power that we have. This is focused on designated campsites. Next slide.
Recognize we also are almost running out of time, so we'll just quickly go through these last ones. Will these camps be indefinite? So we're currently looking at that 3-year timeline that we mentioned for each designated camping site. Next slide, please. Oh, perfect.
We are 1 minute, so thank you. You'll be getting emails, general updates. You can go to the mayor's website and get general updates. Sign up for general updates. If you want to be added to this particular list, please note that. You've got our emails. We're going to send emails back to you tomorrow with PowerPoints, with the transcript of questions, and some links where you can read more in terms of background on our work on this. And thank you. This really good feedback, really good tough questions. We love it. And
look forward to more.
Yeah, we're gonna, for the next week or so, we're gonna be reaching out to other stakeholders, but we will also come back to you in the weeks ahead. So again, thanks so much.
Thank you.